Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to RX Radio. Another episode, a special episode today. Myself, Jordan Jiunta here, joined with the people's favorite, James Thayer. Thanks for being here today, James. I think we had a great conversation. We talked about kind of the entire process of client intake, all the way through program design, all the way through assessment, program design, and client retention, and how you guys can think through this process and how you guys can actually learn how to apply these things from a principles-based approach with James Thayer James Macintosh with the Programming Principles course that's meant to launch in a couple of weeks. We have about 2 weeks left for you guys to register. So make sure you guys keep an eye out on the Prescript social media pages and check out the website if you're interested. Other than that, a couple other things to note is that we have some in-person seminars coming up. So we'll be the whole fucking team, except there. I'm sorry, there. We'll be in Surrey, BC, September 10th and 11th, Edmonton, Alberta, the 17th and 18th. And just keep your eyes out. We have registration open right now for the October class of the Prescript Level 1. So if you're interested, hop in that. That one's filling up pretty quickly. And last but not least, this Friday, if you guys are interested in some new Prescript apparel, check it out. We have that dropping September 2nd. So you guys can hop on that. But I'll stop saying things and you guys can listen to James Thayer talk. So check it out.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
This is an RX Radio first, is that you yourself are a host of RX Radio. I myself am a host of RX Radio, but we've never actually hosted an episode together.
Yeah, this is the first time for us on the Wednesday episode, even just changing it up. People
I know.
won't even know what's happening.
This is so different for so many reasons, but it's so good for just as many reasons.
It just feels so right.
Yeah. Thanks for sitting down with me, ladies and gentlemen. The one, the only, James Thayer here. How are things going with you, man?
It's going pretty well. Semester's just kicking off, so it's staying pretty busy at the university, getting back, working with students. So that's always nice. Kind of reaffirm some of the stuff that we discuss in labs, that we discuss in courses, because sometimes we speak to Prescript coaches that are so actively involved and at such a high level. You're like, well, of course they know this, but then getting to bring it back and kind of expose it to students that are just for the first time learning about it and trying to apply some of these principles with like little experience. So giving them a space to try to bridge that gap where they're taking this information that they learn in the classroom to starting to apply it and kind of teaching them from a mobility, stability, strength model and like principle approach. So it, again, just reaffirming a lot of the stuff that we do. It's nice.
Awesome, man. That's such gratifying work too, is because if you can set someone's, we'll say athletic trajectory or training trajectory on the right path, then that's such an impact that you can have on basically every session that they have from there on out. So, and that's honestly one of my favorite parts about training is like teaching people the rationale and kind of the mindset and the way to think about it. So that's super cool, man. You said you had like 400 students come through in a day?
So at our not in a day, in a 3 hour period. So at this, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
fuck.
At the start of the semester, we have an event called Rock the Rec, and that's basically an open house for brand new students on campus, everyone that's come back to school to get into the rec and get highlights of what we do. So we have different events. We have some prizes available. We have group fitness going, had Ask a Trainer. We had some lawn games in the rec and just different features of the rec, like our rock wall, getting exposed to students for the first time coming back and again, getting to experience what Washburn's about. So yeah, in about a 3 hour block had 400 plus roll through and hopefully try to keep that momentum going for the semester.
I love seeing non-athletic people do athletic things. It's so impressive to me. Like the strategies of the ways that they think are like the best way to accomplish a goal. And like sometimes it's legit. Like it's very intuitive. And sometimes it's just like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
Well, and like to that point, I think that's whenever you see who you're like, oh shit, that kid's actually athletic because like
Yeah.
this shouldn't work. This doesn't make sense, but somehow they're figuring it out.
Yeah, dude. What's the quote? I think it's Dave Spitz, or I've heard Dave Spitz say it. I don't know who he got it from, but like the best athletes are the best compensators. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
like they just find a way to will it into happening. Whether it's the easiest way or not, they'll make it happen. Damn.
Yeah, so it's definitely fun getting back around students because, like you said, it's very rewarding to get to introduce some of these things. Because similar to you, one of my favorite aspects of it is getting in person, getting to have conversations that aren't
Yeah.
really limited to a screen or an hour Q&A. That we have this long form ability to work through stuff to get hands on. I mean, I think some of these conversations is really where the intensives came from,
Yeah.
of getting to bring that experience in person. And one of the things I've really found with students that I enjoy is those light bulb moments in real time. Like,
Yeah.
on social media, on screens, you'll get it after the fact of like, oh, this made so much sense, or like mind's blown, everything like that. But actually seeing like the dots start connecting on somebody's face, and just like I had one of the trainers the other day. We grabbed one of our facilities people and had them run through the movement screen so he could start developing a coach's lens on seeing things above and below the chain to start assessing and kind of get a 300-degree perspective. So he was walking around on this one. It was a lateral lunge that we were going through, and so I'm pretty hands off initially because what I always tell the trainers is I want you to find something. Like, you don't have to have the answers initially why this is happening, but I want you to be able to see something that's happening and just be able to point to it of, I don't know why it's doing this, but I know that doesn't look right. This is also the like advocating going to the gym and just people watching. Just be like, you're going to
Love
see a
it.
lot of things happen. Like we were talking about with the athletes, you're going to see a lot of compensations where you're like, I don't know how they're doing that. So as we were going through, um, everything was really good. Like I picked a terrible person to do the movement screens because they were really proficient in how they move. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, this is terrible.
yeah.
But whenever we got to the lateral lunge, started going, and she was lacking internal rotation on her left side. And so going through, like, it was pretty minimum, but if we were nitpicking, it was something. And it got us into the conversation of how was I seeing these things. So not only the cues in the assessment, but then starting to introduce how you can use the assessment of the outside and surrounding environment as a tool. And so one of them was hearing how hard she had to land on one side opposed to the other to try to reinforce, hey, we're hitting the ground, or the ground's here, we need to react to it, instead
Right.
of having that, having the proprioception to be able to know where she was moving through space and time. So there was a noticeable noise difference in the landing mechanics on one side to the other. And the other one, because in our multi-purpose room, how the floor is laid, it's not one single sheet. It's kind of in sections. And so with that, it leaves some lines on the ground. And so
Mm,
as she was performing the lateral lunge, going one side to the other, had this straight line. She goes down and exactly started veering off. And bringing that up not only to the trainer, but also to our facility staff, like both of them were like, oh shit. Like, didn't even think about that. And it's those little moments and little
right.
cues that you can give people that like make it so rewarding, because it's not a text, like, you're probably never going to find what I just described in a textbook of like, listen to their feet, listen to, or like look at the environment, find those straight lines, see the deviations from that. But that's really the coaching experience. And shameless plug here, but that's one of the aspects of with Prescript where we saw a benefit to programming principles, was bringing that coaching perspective into a course to help teach programming. So it wasn't just a periodization model in X's and O's, but it brought in that coaching element to it to share experience, to talk to trainers, to coaches, and teach them how to develop everything, how to develop and be intentional from everything from the intake all the way to program design to assessment to being able to progress, regress, modify, develop, consider outside factors. That it gave us a lot of opportunity and a lot of perspective through some of the discussions we've had, through the discussions that Mac and myself have had, to mold this into a course that I think is going to be unique to the industry. And if you look around, it's one of the few that's really being offered. So I think we were very, very conscious of working together, working with you and Shallow to develop this to be very intentional to hopefully bring the best product to the market that we can and keep that prescript quality that everyone knows.
I love it, man. I think you and Macintosh together are such great perspectives to bring this because you're very deep thinkers, right? And you guys have a lot of experience in very different areas. And then put on top of that the experiences and the community that we built through Prescript over the past 5 or so years or 6 years is that it's not just your experience. It's not just Macintosh's experience. It's this collective kind of ball of knowledge that you guys have been able to sort through and kind of bring this to light. But even taking it back to what you were saying in just like terms of assessment is it's not necessarily it's not giving someone a fish, right? It's that when these people have these light bulb moments that this light bulb goes off in their head, it's kind of breaking the mold of the way that they're thinking. Is that you're not giving them a piece of information. This person's not always going to line up on the ground in front of that crack and have people lunge. They're It's giving them that insight that some of the things that they need to look for or some of the things that they can use are outside of these kind of very apparent things that we're taught or like the book learning things. It's teaching them that, it's if you need to find something out, look at your environment, look at the tools that you have available to you, and you can use those in terms of assessment or even in like I fucking hate the internet. I fucking hate the internet. I'll say that a million times for a bunch of different reasons. But like, there's always these like different exercise variations and like all this stuff. But like, growing up working out in the gym and like just being in the gym before Instagram, which is a weird thing to think about now, is like you always saw like that old school dude that was super jacked and he always had these super weird like exercise variations. And it's not because he was trying to like look cool on Instagram or like do anything for any sort of views or likes. He was just trying to solve a problem that he had, right? Like, who knows what it might have been? Is that I need to develop this part of my pec, so I'm going to do whatever it is with the bench on this angle and the cable here, and then I'm going to hold on to the upright and whatever it might be. But I think if you can start to think about training and not just your training, but coaching and assessment and programming in that way, is that it's what's the problem you're trying to solve and what are the variables that you have to solve that problem. It just opens your perspective up so much that you're not just working within the framework of what's been given to you through a textbook or through a periodization model or this program that you've been doing your whatever it is 531 or your block periodization. But if you just look at it as a problem that you need to solve, then I think that opens up your perspective in a way that you have a lot more tools than maybe you thought you had when you were looking at it with that more narrowed view. But
Yeah, and really,
go
keep
ahead.
going.
No.
You're on such a good path. I didn't mean to derail you.
Well, honestly, I was just going to throw it back to you because the thing that leads me to, because if we start to think about client intake and assessment, I've been spoiled with this from the start because I always have had a very hands-on approach, right? But over the past couple of years, I think everything has gone digital, right? Everyone's online. Everyone has probably to some extent an online facet to their business, or at least a lot of the people that are listening to this have an online business. And that's something that never really resonated with me, honestly, because I'm not good at it, right? I don't have an efficient intake process. I don't When I do an assessment now, I do a very thorough assessment, but I'm touching people. Like I'm going to feel your glute. I'm going to feel your TFL. I'm going to jam my finger in your armpit and feel your subscap. Like I'm going to touch you. I'm going to see how you move in person in real time. But that's something that we're not really afforded. We don't have that luxury online. So I know that you yourself have an online business, Macintosh also. I wanted to see, kind of toss it to you and see where you take it for assessment and intake process, because this is just genuinely out of my curiosity, because I typically won't take on clients for online programming that I haven't worked with in person, because I feel like there's such a discrepancy between my in-person assessment and my ability to assess online or over the internet.
Oh, absolutely. And full disclaimer, I'm right there with you. If I could go my preferred method, it would be completely online and keep that exclusivity. But again, the day and age where we're at, online is a reality. And full transparency, Mac, I'd give it to Mac. He's way more proficient in how he runs this and how he's developed
I've
his
seen his
business.
spreadsheets.
Oh, so many spreadsheets. I don't think I have that amount of caffeine, nicotine, and just focus in my life to be able to create what he
So,
has with his intake
this
forms.
is a side note, but we lived with him for like 10 days when Shao and I went to Australia. And like probably 2 to 3 times throughout the day, he would just hand me a handful of pills and like this orange water. Or it's orange like liquid. And he would just hand them to me. I wouldn't ask any questions, and I would just take them and get on with my day. But I'm pretty sure that has something to do with his spreadsheets.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you get some nootropics, you get some caffeine, some nicotine, all
Exactly.
kinds of things. But I mean, with that, I think that's part of the reason why me and Mac work so well together. Ask no questions, get no lies. It's just accept it as it is and let's go forward with it. And
Beautiful.
and to kind of bring it back to the programming side of it, I think for a coach, it's very important to realize where that discrepancy is, because not only is it going to augment how you run and how you operate your business, but it it brings awareness in what you're good at and what you're not good at. And
Hmm.
from there, deciding, hey, do I need to get better at this, or am I too old and I'm set in my ways and I just want to go about doing what I do. I think it was Socrates that said, know thyself. So any
Yeah.
coaches, I'm similar to you. Like, I'm pretty sure I know who I am, and it's best to keep a very limited intake. But I have tried to adapt with the times. Have tried to like stop being as much of the old man yelling at the clouds and kind of get with the times. And I think one of the big aspects for me is I had to look at how I was taking in some of the intake forms to get a lot of information front loaded,
Hmm.
because I am very, very much, I want to ask questions. I want to get details. I want real time feedback of how you're experiencing this, how you tell me your story. I don't want to just develop your story with the words I have on simple yes and no's. I want to leave it open ended to allow for you to kind of craft that and take it in the direction that you need, because that's going to tell me some things. And it's a lot harder online, not only the separation of screen, but also looking at how to be a bit more proficient with that intake. So one of the things I had to adapt is I had to be a lot more detailed in the forms, where, there was a point in my life where, okay, like, hey, we have PARQ, we have a health history, and we're good to go, because I'm going to sort a lot of that out in person. Whenever we're talking, I'm going to see how you respond to things. I'm going to get some more detail in building that rapport.
Hmm.
It's almost like through the online space, you try to build out that rapport beforehand so you have a ton of information. So I think it's on the coach a lot more to try to guide that rapport building from the get-go in an online medium than an in-person medium, because personalities don't translate as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so part of that, I think, is besides, like, still have the park U, still have the health history, goal setting, the previous training, injury, like all of that is still there. It's probably expanded out to several more pages, just to try to get a full encompassing amount. The other aspect of it, training online, is knowing if they have social media, because now I need
Hmm.
to do some due diligence to go ahead and look at their social media. I need to do the history in the background through a screen because that's how I'm going to coach them. And so I know for some of my clients, they're not fitness people on social media. Like they're real people living their lives. Like they don't care
Right.
about posting anything. So understanding that as well of not only do I need to see this person move, I need to start coaching them on how to set up their camera angles that is going to give me the best feedback to be able to assess in the way that I need to assess because I no longer have access to that 360 view. I no longer, can like with a couple steps see the difference of okay, you're moving like this and your facial expression is giving me this shock and awe like I can change this in real time where now
Mm-hmm.
it's not only it's coaching the person to understand that but also some of the things that I would do in person that I wouldn't necessarily have to verbalize, I have to be a lot more intentional with how I'm telling that person I need these things because of this. I'm trying to get their investment into it that this is important. Like I'm not just asking you to record a video like this because the hell of it. It's I need it for this angle. I need it to understand like one of the things I do with some exercise I'll have give me your first, give me your last because I'm trying to see where that fatigue management is just in trying to get what's your first set, what's your last set. I need to see where that movement efficiency breakdown is, where that fatigue accumulation, because that's going to dictate how I progress in the phase going forward is based on are you able to maintain the same movement quality on your last set that we had you moving in the sets prior, and if not, how I'm going to adapt and how I'm going to modify. But again, it's a lot more thinking on my end of oh, I need to be mindful of this because I can't just sit there and see, oh, like, yeah, you're completely gassed. So yeah, I think kind of in a roundabout way on the video side, it's being a lot more intentional and almost like a director having to direct the camera angle, having to be mindful of the space that they're in, having to have a better awareness of the equipment that they have available for them. Pretty sure, like Mac will go through and like have a whole list, and I think has even talked about like either like having pictures available for people and everything where that's something beforehand I'd never think about because we're in the space like either I'm already familiar with the equipment or I can just get on it and be like okay, let's change it around like this, where instead now it's having to look up brands, it's having to understand is this from a single pull point or is this like a dual cable that it's coming from, are the handles attached, so now I have options that I can change these out or not if I don't like the position that it's putting people in. All that to say, to me, it's a lot more work, and knowing that people are coming into the space having never coached in person blows my mind. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know that I would be able to do that because how important in person is for me and like the experiences that I've been able to develop in a coaching eye, in rapport building, in every aspect of how I train and coach has been developed from that in-person experience that it's definitely been a learning curve in trying to develop into a coach that trains online.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And there's a lot of points that you brought up that I definitely want to expand upon with that. But before we do, here's a PSA for everyone that works with an online coach and sends them videos. Trim your fucking videos. That
Oh
is all.
yeah.
No one wants to see a minute and 45-second video of you doing one rep. Trim your video, please. Thank you. Okay, now to move
Thank
on.
you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
it needs to
The
be
people
said.
in the back need to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think one of the most important things that you said was very early on in kind of that rant that you went down was about building dialogue. is that, and that's something that I think is very important in just the coach athlete relationship in general, is if you guys aren't using the same words with the same meanings, then you're just on two different wavelengths here. So there's a lot of kind of education that has to go into this, and that has to start early on as you're developing that relationship. And that doesn't matter if it's, a high level competitive athlete, someone that you're working with in terms of performance, because they had a dialogue, they had a vocabulary with their prior coach that may not match up with the things or the messages that you're trying to convey. So, and then even a better opportunity is someone kind of like you're saying that's never really trained before. They're just people. They're just people that want to get strong. Is that's where you can start to instill really solid values and really solid kind of principles around working out, where those people can carry those forward. And then even if their time with you is not very long lived, they can carry those forward and they can have a successful um, training lifespan, I guess you could say. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. And with that is also the way that you can communicate with someone, or the way that you have to communicate with someone when you're coaching them
Yeah.
online, is very different than the way that you can communicate with them in person, right? In person, you can watch them, you can read body language, they can read yours, you can poke them, you can touch them, you have all these things, you can show them in the moment, you can position them. Online, you pretty much have to use your words. You can send them videos, you can send them links, you can educate them on it, but you have to be really effective and pointed in your communication. And if it's not to the point, they're not going to listen to it. No one's going to read a paragraph on how to set up their split squat or their single arm whatever lat pull down. So you have to be really, really effective in the way that you're communicating, and that comes with building that vocabulary with them, right? Like if someone doesn't know what a contralateral load is on a split squat, then it's
Yeah.
those words don't mean anything, right? I don't know. He said do a split squat. I'm going to do a split squat, but and these are very nuanced little things, but the more experience this person gets, or the more specific the adaptation that you're trying to derive is, the more that these things matter. So I thought that was a really good point that you made early on there. And that's something, kind of bring it back to the assessment and intake process. I don't know if you do this, but I talk shit, a lot of shit, but I do work with online clients that I haven't touched or met in person before. So this is something that I do. It's something that I don't like to do. So I don't know why I'm telling the world on the internet that I do this. If you DM me, I'm not going to coach you. Um, but just kidding, just kidding. Uh, Something that I do with people that I haven't touched in person or worked with in person is I'll book an hour call with them. If you're serious about coaching, let's get on the phone. We're going to talk. And then the other things that you mentioned, the things that I really expand, because people undersell them because they don't, a lot of times they won't understand the importance of it, is their training history and their injury history. Right? Is I want to dig in. I want to know how many times you rolled that right ankle skateboarding when you were a teenager. I want to know everything about the shoulder surgery that you kind of forgot what shoulder was on. I want to know everything about your high school strength and conditioning. I want to know everything about what you've been doing the last 6 months. And that's the stuff that really helps you understand where this person is coming from. And that you need to know where they're coming from to be able to point them in the right direction for where they want to go. So I think those are the things that for me are really important. Is just building a vocabulary with that person, building your dialogue, being able to communicate with them effectively, and then understanding where they're coming from. Like what brought them to this point where they now think that you're the appropriate person to get them to the next point. So that's kind of where I would stress the intake process, and the assessment process kind of stems from that. Is that now that I understand where you've been, I kind of have hints to what to look for when we're assessing, right? Is, if you're an Olympic weightlifter and you've been split jerking with the same foot forward your entire career, I know which way your pelvis is rotated. I know which side you suck at internal rotation on. I know which way your hips are going to shift when you front squat. So it's these things leave clues, but if you don't turn over these rocks when you get started with someone, then you're always left kind of catching up and like kind of wondering why is this happening? And then there's these questions that were left unanswered that could have given you this information really early on.
You bring up so many good points in that discussion that like we're talking about an online space that's oversaturated, where there's an endless amount of options and possibilities, that if they're coming to you as a coach, it's for a reason.
Right.
They, you're either, I talk to coaches all the time, like, if you can provide resources, you become a resource for people. And like, that's why they're coming to you, because they see you as a resource that, especially in those situations, like in you being in Olympic lifting, you being in chiropractic, that you'll have people come to you that you are their last resort. And it's not because they didn't want to, it's because they've exhausted all their other resources. And whenever you're kind of the last resort that they found you, and you're able to fix their problems just by knowing where they came from and understanding, hey, I don't know how anybody has not caught this over the last decade, because it's a pattern that has repeated throughout your life. Like, it should just be a red sign right in your face that, hey, it's here, look at this. But no, I think that's really where the coaching quality comes from, and being able to take that experience that you've had throughout your career, and any coach throughout their career, in being able to connect with that person to get to not only ask better questions, but get better answers from the people, to better understand them, where they're coming from, and then apply that information to find a path forward.
Mhm.
Think that words absolutely matter, and having a shared verbiage is very, very important, because you can say the same thing and mean it completely different based on what your backgrounds are, based on your understanding of that. In the movement screen that we do at the rec, a couple key points that we'll ask: is there, first off, is there pain? But also, which everybody understands that, but it's, is there pain? It's an open-ended question to elaborate on. If there is, what's it feel like? What are these things? We kind of have a couple different prompts. Another one is there pinching or pulling? Like, does this feel like, because I'm not going to tell somebody, does this feel like an eccentric stretch of your hamstring? They won't know what that is. Does this feel like something is pulling, getting tighter? Or pinching, does it feel like a blockage? Does it, and more often than not, I'll kind of direct them. Usually this is more muscular, this might be more joint, and kind of some relatability, that now they can take that and kind of run with that verbiage, because it's simple enough that they understand it. This is the whole point of this, of like being able to understand that person and create and develop shared dialogue, because that gives you not only rapport, but it gives you an understanding and a path forward. This is the whole reason that I've put in a personality test in my intake form that I'll have them go through. And it's less so, like, I know you're laughing about it, but I
I
also
love it, man.
I
This is
also do
so
this to,
you.
like,
That's why I love it. But please go on.
relationships, friends, like, everybody gets this. But
He won't be your friend if you're a
I need to know what number you are.
ANJXTYZ. Yeah.
So and with that, like, so the one I use is Enneagram, and it's not because it's better or worse than any of the other ones. It's just because I have the best understanding of it. So we're coming from a point that I have a deeper knowledge of it, and I like how it kind of lays everything out for the individual. But the first conversation we have after they take it is, it's not that, okay, this is all you, we're going to go forward because this is what it tells you. It's, do you agree or not agree? What things do you agree with? What things do you not agree with? It also gives me a reference point back that, hey, as we're going through, what are some of the things you would agree with? What are some of the things that you didn't? Do those things that you didn't agree with start revealing themselves, and like help with the conversation of, hey, maybe do you think it's because of this? I also chose that one because it goes and it breaks down how the different numbers, there's 1 through 9 on there of the different types, how they interact with each other. And like, it has different levels of, like, here is whenever it's a very positive relationship, here's where it's very negative. And in each individual one, it has kind of similar of, here's where you're good in life, here's where things are going okay, and here's some of the traits that come out whenever things aren't going well. And oftentimes we can look to, like, the not going well, that's stress. In our field, that's a ton of what we're dealing with, is stress management. It's understanding not
It
only
is.
not only what stress we're we're applying to the individual when they're going into their training sessions, but we also have to be mindful of what's that look like in the accumulation over the week. What's that look like in the accumulation over the phase and going forward in phases of when do we need to continue, where can we continue to drive stress that the person can adapt from it, or where they're no longer adapting and now it's becoming negative. That we also have to be mindful that there's outside factors, because people are people and they live outside of the gym and they have lives and families and they
Don't
do
strive
things.
to be that person ever.
Yeah, we just need bows where it's just pure bliss all the
Yeah.
time. But understanding, like, hey, I've got a client that is in a very high stress job. I need to be mindful of that whenever we're training, because I mean, you've trained type A's, high stress jobs. What type of training do they like to do? They just want to beat the shit out of themselves. So what's the last thing they need? Is just you to
Yeah.
hammer them into the ground to reinforce that, oh, I just need stress, 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 stress. But having those open conversations and having that relatable verbiage of, you took this personality test, it doesn't define you. That's the big message. If anybody wants to start incorporating personality types, don't take that as this defines the person. It's just shared similarities that we read the same thing. And in that conversation, what did you agree with? What did you not? So we can go from there. So I just have some anchor points that we can relate back to in our conversations, in knowing how to develop, knowing how to continue to progress together. Because I think that's another aspect of, with any type of training, like, it's a collaboration. There's a coach and client
Yeah.
dynamic, but it is a huge collaboration.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the personality test is a very, like I said, it's a very James Thayer thing,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love that you do it, and I love that it gets buy-in, and it provides you a deeper understanding of that client and what drives them. Kind of my version of that is just listening to what they say and how that impacts their actions in the session, right? If we're talking in person, if we're talking online, like just getting feedback. Like, I have this client, I'll talk shit on him any chance that I can get because he's a huge fucking pussy. He's a gigantic pussy. But I love him because he's good to be around. He pays me and he pays me before it's due, and it's a good trainer client interaction. But there's been a tone that has been set in that session that he's gonna do he's only gonna work as hard as he wants to work. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. I'm going to give you the best options to work as hard as you deem necessary, because this guy's, same thing. He's got a stressful job. But if he comes in and he tells me that, oh, my back's a little bit tight today, I know exactly what that means. I means that you're not going to do a dumbbell row. If I try and get you to bend your knees or hinge at your hips, you're going to go home. So we're going to sit down on an incline bench, and we're probably going to do bicep curls and whatever else you can do seated for the entire session, because that's all you're going to give me today. So, and then I have other clients who say, yeah, I don't know, my elbow's a little bit sore. But really what that means is that they've been maxing out for like 6 days straight, and their elbow's probably excruciating, but they're still going to try and max out again today. So
Absolutely.
you have to understand not only the words that they're saying, but the connotation that the words that they're saying holds. So, and that's going to be different, probably a more effective way than just figuring this out as you go, like I do, is a personality test, like you do. But you'll notice these things if you see someone train, or if you see their footage, which is like kind of another thing for anyone that's probably that's listening right now that has started their business online and has never trained these people in person, is you need as many touch points as possible. And that's, whether that's a verbal check-in, whether that's face-to-face, whether that's a video call, whether that's notes in a sheet, whether that's videos of them working out. If they're not giving you feedback, you're not coaching that person, right? It's a conversation is what it has to be all the time. They're constantly giving you information, and you're giving them back information. It has to be an exchange both ways. It can't just be a spreadsheet that you update. Okay, we're going at 5% here, take 2 reps off, whatever, slower tempo here, whatever it is, week after week. That's not a coaching relationship. You're writing a program at that point. And that's, whatever it is, people do that. People make plenty of money doing that. But I think for people to understand, especially people in the online space, is that you need to understand the service that you're providing so that you can actually provide value with that service.
Yeah, and I think with that, there is that huge discrepancy sometimes in understanding of the difference between creating programs and coaching. That there's almost an artistry to being able to coach somebody, because that's really what takes it from, the like a cookie cutter basis, or like a general program for anybody, to a program for an individual. Like it's that constant adaptability. It's that being able to modify. It's knowing when to push somebody, how long you can push somebody. That you can't just understand that through the X and O's. You need that feedback. You need that collaboration and that input, because people people are people, and there's that psychology element to it that is going to play a huge factor. Mac and I talk about this all the time, how differently we train. Like it's probably terrifying for his hip how long I can run in the 90 percentile on my lifts. Like I can run that for months on end. I think the
I love it.
the
I
last
love
one
watching
was
it.
I think the last one was like 4 months ish that I was running like 90 percentile on 3 or 4 of like my primary lifts, but
Amazing.
I can handle that and like adapt really, really well to it. Whereas Mac has a replaced hip. Like we're not trying to run that for 4 months. He doesn't need that. It's gonna be a not only a negative experience. He's also hard headed and is gonna be one of those people that his legs hanging off and he's still trying to go through and like do these squats. But it's understanding that as a coach, you need to pull back sometimes on that, or you need to know when to push somebody. That there has to be that willingness to adapt and modify. And I think that's another big thing with coaching in person. The experience that you get is, oh, this isn't going to work today. And like
Yeah.
you might have spent hours going over this, getting like the perfect program that you think, hey, it lines up, everything's right. Like this is going to be a good day. You go in and they're not even getting the warm up. It all goes to shit. They're not going to be able
Mm-hmm.
to run this. If you haven't experienced, if you haven't experienced that as a coach, that is some of the dues that you have to pay. Is like, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to figure out how we can salvage this. Need to figure out what's going on. Like, not only is that training session, now I need to reevaluate the whole week. And there
Yeah.
sometimes you need a little bit of that stress, because stress creates adaptation. So we have to
Yeah.
evolve or die.
Yeah, I agree. And that's coaching right there. That's the difference between coaching and programming. Programming would work if it were an ideal, perfect scenario and you could predict the rate at which this person's going to adapt and the way that these stressors are going to affect the person. That's programming. Is you can write the program for the next 4 years and create an Olympic champion. And if everything works out according to those numbers, you've done it. But in real life, you're going to have to coach someone, and that's not going to be how it works out. So that's kind of a good distinction between the two. And I think kind of off the backs of that is kind of like you were saying with yourself and Mac, is that the difference in training, honestly, I think it has to do with understanding the adaptation that you're trying to make. Right? Like a lot of what you were saying earlier, you were referring back to different phases of training. Right. And I think people don't necessarily understand, and this is kind of to speak towards the programming course that you and Mac are about to start in what, in a week or two? Next
Yeah,
week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks? Fuck yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, is that understanding phasic training is that the way that training is organized is for a reason. There is a purpose behind organizing your training, right? It's because you want to make an adaptation. And then once you successfully make that adaptation, you want to funnel it into the next adaptation that you're trying to make, right? Like phasic potentiation is what that's called. Is that I want to move from a general multi-planar capacity building phase into something that's more strength oriented, but the adaptations that I make in this generalized phase are going to allow me the amount of joint mobility, joint stability, um, proprioception, body awareness, joint sense that I can now take and I could transfer to these very specific movements that is going to make me now better at these movements because I have maybe an increased metabolic capacity. Maybe I have a little bit more muscle mass because I was doing a little bit higher volume. And I have no restriction in joint range of motion because that's one of the adaptations that I wanted to make before I really started to run some current through the system and load it up and get more repetitive. And then kind of carrying that adaptation into the next, like power, or making that something a little bit more sport specific afterwards. But understanding that if we just stay in the same training phase for too long, then we're going to get diminishing returns really quickly. We're not going to be able to have adaptations at the same rate if we stay in that one phase for too long. It has to be kind of cyclical in the way that we load, um, in the volume that we have, in the exercise selection. It has to be varied from time to time, or else that's when we get injuries, when we just run too much current through the same system and say, as we're doing that, we favor our left leg 3% more in our back squat. And eventually, we herniate a disc or whatever that might be. We develop a hip shift, or we have some rotation, or we get a knee tendonitis, whatever that is. Those are those things that are going to make a coach be a coach, is understanding that we're going to run into these things if we just run linear progression until you've added 1,000 pounds to your squat, because that's not going to happen. Is that we're going to get to the point where, okay, we can add maybe 10 pounds on a top set for 4, 6, maybe even 8 weeks at a time, but eventually you're going to reach failure. And when you reach failure, we can't just start back at 65% and add 10 pounds a week until you fail again. That's not going to be the adaptation that we're trying to make, or that's not going to be effective at making the adaptation that we're striving for. So there needs to be variance along that program. So I think that's an important point to be made too. And this is kind of, we're starting to actually kind of progress through this whole model, as we started with intake, process, and assessment. And now we're actually talking about program design. And I think a lot of what I've seen in like widely distributed programs, I've worked with some good coaches before that understand this and they can apply this. But like, if you just join a weightlifting club program, it's going to be, probably more linear progression based in a block periodized or wave loaded way that's not necessarily going to align with your specific goals. So I think that's kind of something that is maybe less known among the general population or some of the newer coaches, is understanding the reason behind program design and phasic training.
And I know for me personally, the SRA curve, you doing the overview of that in the introduction to weightlifting course that you have. It's also evergreen, so you don't have to wait for registration on that. But it had a huge influence on the development of the programming principles course, because it's a simple model that is, or it's a very, very complex model that can be simplified and applied in a
Yeah.
basic understanding for coaches of, hey, here's stress. Stress isn't bad, but understand exercise induces stress. From that, there's going to be fatigue and there's going to be recoverability. And to continue to progress, to adapt, we have to continue to send that stress, but it's when you send that stress. And so that aspect of not only the consideration of the stress that's being introduced in a training session, but over a long term progression. How do we build this out? We looked at understanding that trainers, coaches, most of the time, whenever they get a client, it's not, hey, I'm with you for the next year. Like, it is rare that you get that commitment. You have to have some serious, not only like quality, but like some credentials. If you're having somebody and they're like, you've got me for the next year, or Olympians, you've got me for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Most of us aren't that lucky. So it's understanding that in a similar model, there's a reverse engineer of it. It's okay, where do we want to be? Here's our goal. We're at week 1. We're trying to get to week 52. Where is this that we want to be? And let's start taking the steps back from there to understand how we're going to build out that pathway to get us to this goal, because now we have some time orientation with it. And that's kind of whenever we discuss the macro cycle of it in the programming course, it's this long-term adaptation that we're trying to drive and understand within the context of 6 months of a year. But knowing that most coaches, most trainers, they're not getting a sign on for a year. They're, maybe like 12 weeks or smaller, longer sessions like that. But it's by knowing these principles, you can introduce that reverse engineering or reverse periodization and understand, here's where we're at. This is the time that we have to build towards here. But I know where our long-term progression needs to go because I already mapped that out. I don't have to have the whole program, but I have to have the direction. I have to have the clarity of vision and fluidity of process to be able to achieve that. And now that starts becoming a selling point and a communication point for you of, hey, you bought a 4-month package, but what we have a year-long plan. We're going to get you to the 4-month package, but in a year, this is where we can get to. This is the direction we can continue to go and keep progressing. That you start cluing your clients in on, this is the vision, and they start investing in that. So it's no longer that awkward of like, hey, you're done with your sessions. Do you want to pay for more and keep training? It's, we've been talking about this for months because this is the plan. This is what you're investing in. You're not spending money to come hang out with me. You're investing in yourself to be able to drive towards this goal that you came on with me. Whether that is, hey, I want to be more active so I can like be there for my kids and do things with them. I want to be out of pain. I want to accomplish these competitive or performance based goals. It's having that vision and then bringing them in on it, letting them know it's not that space of like, oh, just do this because it's no, let me help you understand why we're doing this. They might not have the interest to a personal trainer or coach level that you need to like nerd out for an hour, but just some insight really helps that investment and helps develop that rapport because there's trust that's developed because you can start pointing to those stages. Look how we progressed here. Look how we progressed here. And they start seeing the larger picture because you're able to explain it to them. You have that insight, you have that vision that now they're starting to see it. So not only like that reverse periodization approach and conversation that's practical for a coach and a client to have, and it doesn't turn into like a weird sales pitch of now I'm trying to like get you to re-up on the very last day together. We're having long conversations and you have an understanding and a trust that's been developed. So it's not that awkward weird thing. It's, yeah, of course I want to stay training with you. Like, why wouldn't I? So, kind of taking that, helping coaches understand how to develop a model that has a lot of sustainability long term to be successful, even whenever it's off of an initial packet that's bought, but then taking that and building that rapport, building that trust, and in helping them see what you can accomplish together in that collaborative effort.
Yeah, I love it. We've taken it full spectrum, all the way from client intake, assessment, program design, programming phases, all the way into retention. Because what I'm hearing when you're saying all this is that the most important, I mean, there's definitely other factors, but I think in my mind, the most important factor of hiring someone to get you results is getting fucking results.
Yep.
Right? So if you map this out, first off, if you have a thoughtful, and it doesn't take much thought, it takes a basic understanding of, like you're saying, the SRA curve, progression of phases. If you can map that out and you can realize that the micro shit doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It matters that you keep training on a consistent enough basis with this emphasis during this phase, and you're going to get results. You're going to get results with this person. And if you get results, they're going to be happy. They're going to hit their goals. They're going to be satisfied. They're going to see the value in the sessions that they're paying you to design for them, and they're going to stay with you. So I think that's probably the most important part of all this is once you get clients, if you do right by your clients, they're going to stay with you and you're going to have a successful business. So
Yeah,
that's how program design ties into all this.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the greatest point to this and kind of what the vision of it is. It's to help coaches get results for their trainers or for their
Yeah.
clients and do that for a long time over and over and over and over and to be able to complete that process because it's not dependent on a system. It's understanding the principles that go into this because that's how you adapt, that's how you modify, and that's how you individualize it by understanding just the principles of something and then start applying it. I think that's we were very, very intentional when trying to develop this course and kind of taking it through a prescript approach of helping educate coaches, but also helping coaches continue to be successful. That when we looked at this course, we wanted to approach it in a way that it lowered the barrier of entry for some coaches that haven't been able to come into any of the prescript courses yet or intensives or anything that they've been waiting on it, they've been trying to develop, that we wanted to have a tie-in that that takes aspects from all the other courses and brings it into the principles because as you said before, prescript is a very, very collaborative community and understanding, we can take some aspects of PSL1, can take aspects of skill acquisition, can take like the SRA approach that you lay out in intro to weightlifting. We can take all these because they're principles, they apply across all mediums. And this can be for a lot of coaches the first introduction to how to program outside of what was taught in a book, but also an introduction to the prescript way to developing this collaboration, to really getting immersed into the community through a course that is going to be able to not only have some touch points on other courses that people can go deeper into and get a greater understanding, but it takes these principles that you'll see continuously repeat throughout other courses because there is that understanding of how to utilize these to find results and get results for your clients.
I love it, man. This is, yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. And this is the foundation, right? This is the building blocks that you're giving people to be successful in program design. And that's going to give you success in client retention because you'll be able to get results for your clients. And that's really what all of this comes down to. So I'm stoked. We have about 2 weeks left to register. Programming Principles, James Thayer, James Macintosh. Check it out, www.pre-script.com. It's right on the homepage there, I believe. If not, it's on the courses tab too. Make sure you reach out. You follow James Thayer. Was it Thayer2513 on Instagram?
Yep.
Yeah, we got it. Nailed it. And reach out to either of us if you guys need anything. We're happy to help. Hopefully, we'll see you in the programming course or we'll see you in the collective sometime here soon. Anything to close on, James?
No, just kind of to your point of like we're always looking to have conversations. So don't be afraid to
Yes.
reach out and start these conversations because there's been, a lot of people that have seen some of the course stuff that have wondered and just not quite sure. Just reach out, ask questions. Happy to answer it. And hopefully, with this podcast episode, that it helped provide some insight and maybe, get the wheels a turning in your brain. And we'll see you September 8th.
I love it. I love it, man. And side note, I feel like I have to mention this. I just saw a text message come from James Macintosh that he has FOMO that he's not on this podcast. So just know we love you, Mac. We do.
So much love.
But you can hang out with him in the programming course too. All right. Thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you soon.